yourself a cold one.
They strike 'em, huh?
And listen to Ross Tucker break down the top college prospects on another tasty edition of The College Draft.
Yeah, it's Daddy Soda time here on the College Draft Podcast, presented, of course, as always, by DraftKings. DraftKings, the crown is yours. I'm Ross Tucker, former NFL offensive lineman, 5 teams, 7 years, and you know this man. And we normally record this pretty early on Monday mornings, but because our guy, Emory Hunt, is the man on the scene, he's the reporter on the scene at every All-Star game. We're recording this late Sunday night because his flight got switched to Monday. So love the hustle from Emory. You know how I feel about that. Love the flexibility from Emory. Love getting a chance to talk with him, especially since he's the guy that actually attends all these All-Star games. Check him out on social media at FBallGamePlan on Twitter, Football Game Plan on YouTube. If you want the draft guide that I use, if you want the draft guide that I get and give to like one of my best friend's sons because he eats it up, listen to me. If you just want to make sure you know every guy out there from a guy that goes to every All-Star game, it's footballgameplan.com/2025 draft guide. Cannot possibly highly recommend it enough. Yes, he's got like the top first-round guys out there, like everybody else does, but he also has all the other guys. You know what I mean? Like he also has all the other guys that get drafted later or undrafted free agents. I mean, how many times can you read the same scouting report on Cam Ward? Or you know what I mean? Can hear the same people talk about Cam Ward. Like he's got an opinion on Cam Ward. He loves Cam Ward. But you can also hear the opinions of other people as well. Check him out on social at FBallGamePlan. Of course, I'm talking about the great Emory Hunt. I'm Ross Tucker. I told you that already, but my socials at Ross Tucker NFL. We are at Ross Tucker Pod. Got a bunch of things, Emory, I want to get to here today. I want to get to number one, the NFL scouting lessons from the weekend that was, because I've got several actually that I jotted down while I was watching these 4 games the last couple days. Then I got to hear about the top prospects to watch in the national championship game, as well as what we're going to be doing about the NFL All-Star Game circuit that you've been on. Quinn Ewers is going pro as opposed to going ahead and going into the portal, which I think is an interesting decision. So there's a lot to get to. Let's start, though, since the Ravens-Bills really just ended when we're recording this, Emory. I certainly have some, but I don't want to steal your thunder. Anything really jump out to you from a scouting lesson from these games this weekend, these 4 games that we should take away these next couple months going into the draft in April?
I really think it should be even bigger than what we are not talking about, right? And it's the sports psychology of the athlete, and we've seen this manifest itself over the course of time, right? With big play after big play, who can make the play, who can't make the play. And we saw this across the course of these games. Jaden Daniels locked in play for Washington. Jared Goff's fumbles. He has been protecting the football. Interceptions. He's been protecting the football all season long. Mark Andrews drops. Like he's been a sure-handed tight end, one of the best weapons they have on that team and one of the best tight ends in the game. But crucial drops, crucial fumbles in situations that he probably can master 9 times out of 10. But there's one time when everything is at stake, it happens. And also in the Philadelphia Eagles game, who is the guy that can make the play that is there to be made when the timing calls for it? Jalen Carter on one side, Saquon Barkley on the other side. So sports psychology for me, Mike Sainristil, the rookie corner from Washington, how he baited Goff into throwing an interception on the post, right? He's in trail technique. We didn't see Carters like that since Aaron Glenn and Darrell Green pick off those type passes where they bait guys and throw those and they undercut them. And so those guys who were mentally ready for the occasion and whether it was a team or themselves let the guys down, the other team. So I'm always fascinated by who can do that and who shows up in the moment, who doesn't show up in the moment. And I've talked about this before. Nick Anderson is a great shooter, but in that moment, he missed those 4 free throws. Probably makes 1,000 free throws out of 900. But in that moment against the Rockets, he missed those 4 free throws. So sports psychology, they talk about it with kickers, but I think it needs to be expanded to everybody.
It's a really, really good point. I post on social media at Ross Tucker. I feel sick for Mark Andrews. I've interviewed him the last couple of years doing Ravens games. He's a fantastic player, great guy. The fumble was a terrific play by Terrell Bernard, so I don't put that much on him, but the drop's going to eat away at him. And interestingly, on some level, the drop takes away from, I think more of the focus would have been potentially on the 2 first half turnovers from Lamar Jackson. He didn't have a game all year with 2 turnovers. And then he had a really silly fumble. I don't know what happened on the interception. There had to be some type of miscommunication with Rashad Bateman. That didn't look right to me. But, yeah. I think that's a really, really big part of it. Certain guys play their best, rise to the occasion when the moments are the biggest, and other guys don't. And honestly, I don't know what I would have been. I'm not saying that critically. I don't know if I was in some of those situations, how I would have been. I think it's a really, really good point. Speaking of psychology, Emory, one that jumped out to me, there were a lot of mental mistakes this weekend. Texans not blocking guys that they're supposed to block. Can't remember Lions Commanders, but Eagles, Rams, the center for the Rams is letting Bo Limmer is letting Jalen Carter go. Can't say I would recommend that. Mekhi Becton letting guys go, or he's downfield. It is football intelligence matters. I don't know what you call it, Emory. I've heard people call it FBI, like football intelligence, football IQ. I feel like a lot of these games, it's like the team that doesn't make those mistakes where guys are coming scot-free. Now in the Rams-Eagles, they both had it, but boy, you really got to have guys out there that are mentally sharp. Honestly, I think it's one of the biggest reasons why I played for a while. I almost always did the right thing, but there's other guys that were more physically gifted, but sometimes with pressure and complicated things, they just didn't process the same way or as well. It really, really matters, and it shows up, Emory, in these critical situations.
There's a reason why Kansas City is the quote-unquote worst 16-2 team in the league, right? Because they may not be the best version of the Kansas City Chiefs that we've seen over the course of Mahomes' time there, but man, they are the smartest, most disciplined, most assignment-sound football team, and they do all of the little things really well, and they do not beat themselves. That's why they are so hard to beat and why they're in the AFC Championship game for the 7th year in a row. That's why, Ross. That's the missing key right there. They're well coached, but they also are smart football players and they're a smart football team, and they do not beat themselves.
It's a really good point, because as I was on the call Saturday with Kevin Harlan, I said a number of times the unforced errors by the Texans, like the penalties. Now, a couple of them, they got a raw deal, but the penalties, or, C.J. Stroud taking sacks when he shouldn't. It was bad. It was really bad. A couple others that jumped out to me. How about the fact that the 2 MVPs, Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen, I'm saying they're both MVPs in my mind, right? How many quarterbacks went before them? Baker Mayfield, Sam Darnold, somebody else?
Josh Rosen.
Well, he went before Lamar, but maybe not before Josh Allen.
Right.
This is interesting, actually, Emory. This is a longer conversation. I think the thought was that Baker and Darnold were more polished and more experienced. I remember you saying this with Anthony Richardson, and we've said it with other guys. The reality is Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson were by far the most physically gifted of those five guys, and they are also by far the best of those five guys. So while we like to put a lot on the mental side of it or experience or whatever, I guess there's something to be said for being the most gifted, like Lamar is with his feet and his arm and his brain, and Josh Allen is with his size. And, those guys are clearly better than the other three, yet a lot of people didn't think so because they were raw. They were both raw.
And it also depends on where you go. And I know there's no development at the NFL level, but at the end of the day, if you have a coach staff that's in unison from owner, GM, coach, coordinators, everybody's on the same page with this is the guy we're going to go with, then we're going to ride the wave and we're going to make sure we see it out on the other side. That's how you get a Josh Allen and that's how you get a Lamar Jackson to really realize their potential. And on the other side, if guys are not locked up, that's how you get a Sam Darnold not finding his way until we see him with the Minnesota Vikings, or an Alex Smith until we see him with Jim Harbaugh before moving on to Andy Reid. So it does depend. You have to have the physical talent, and if you have the right situation, you can then grow, blossom, and become what they project you to be.
Very happy for Bills fans watching them tonight. A lot of them were drinking Labatt Blue Lights with their friends, with their fellow Bills fans, living life to the power of we. Always enjoy responsibly beer. Labatt USA, Buffalo, New York, as the Bills get another crack at the Kansas City Chiefs. Want to get into a couple things in tonight's game, Monday night's game, Emory. I can't remember. Did we get your bet last week? It's Notre Dame is getting 8.5. The total's 45.5. I'm after seeing McGlinchey last week and Ronnie Stanley this week, both wear sleeves in Buffalo. I'm all in on Ohio State. Offensive tackles from Notre Dame in Buffalo wearing sleeves. We can't have that, Emory. We cannot have that. That shows me that Notre Dame is soft. I'm joking, but only a little bit. Anyway, Ohio State's laying the 8.5. Total's 45.5. What are you thinking?
Notre Dame plus the points and also the under. Listen, a one-game season, winner take all. Things will be tighter. This game will look like how the Georgia game looked for Notre Dame in terms of like how close the score was, and also how they played Penn State. Ohio State has the offensive firepower, but they're going up against a very good defense. Notre Dame will try to shrink the ball game and force Ohio State to make tackles in space consistently. Ohio State would then subsequently make Riley Leonard throw the football consistently to try to beat them through the air, and we'll see if he can do that. I just think we're in store for a 21-17 ball game, tight game, under the total, and Notre Dame keeps it close.
Interesting. It's funny because for the Raw Sucker Football podcast, I spoke with Mike Golick Jr. about the national championship game, and we came to the conclusion Notre Dame is really young, and Notre Dame doesn't have that many. You can tell me like the prospects to watch in this game. I think maybe their best prospect, Morrison's hurt, and he's out. I'm curious how you feel about Xavier Watts, but Ohio State has like a ton of guys on their team that are going to get drafted. I don't know how many Notre Dame has that are going to get drafted this year. Who are some of the prospects that we should really, really have our eye on in this game?
Well, for Notre Dame, obviously, Love. I don't know if he's draft eligible, but man,
sophomore.
He is sophomore. So he's not draft eligible, but that's the one to watch for Notre Dame. And obviously, we talk about Watts. Watts is a very good safety. I could see him playing in Buffalo. Like I could see him as part of that third safety look, playing downhill, top-down defense, and making plays. Morrison would be the top guy, but he's hurt, so we got to see how he translates. And I think he's going to be like a late first, early second round type pick. But for Ohio State, when you talk about draft picks, it's not just draft picks. They have like first round picks, plural. And so that changes everything. But obviously, the running back situation, I'm a big fan of what Travion Henderson does because he has good footwork, good vision, good burst. He can catch the ball well. He blocks well. I don't know if he goes in round one, but he is someone that's going to end up being a starter in the NFL because he can do all three things rather well. And he's a 3-down player, and he'll be on the field because you can trust him in those situations. Defensively, he's watching Jack Sawyer do his thing, watching those defensive backs do their thing. So there's a lot to get into, which is why they're in this ball game. But I just truly feel like Will Howard, quarterback, and Riley Leonard are probably the two guys that have the biggest ability to raise their stock in this high leverage, high stakes game.
Such a good point. You don't hear about either one of those guys really as NFL prospects very often, yet they've contributed to getting their teams into the national championship game. You know, it's funny too, Emory. I don't know what the lesson is here, but a couple years ago, JT Tuimoloau had the best game, one of the best games by a defensive player I've ever seen. I guess this must have been his redshirt freshman year or his sophomore year for Ohio State at Penn State. He had like 2 touchdowns, like 5 sacks. I mean, he was the reason why Ohio State won that game. I thought he'd go pro that year. Came back for last year. Then he came back again for this year. But I feel like he's almost been overshadowed this year by Sawyer. Whereas a couple years ago, Sawyer you barely even heard about. But guys don't stay the same. Like some guys get better. I'm not going to say JTT got worse, but maybe he's plateaued a little bit.
But what's funny is, look what we talked about earlier, rising to the occasion. He's been on fire in the playoffs, both he and Sawyer. And it seems like Tuimoloau has done a great job of just, hey, they need a sack right now. They need a big play. He's making that play. Same with Sawyer. Sawyer was kind of a afterthought, so to speak. And then now he's making game-changing plays on both ends of defense. So you're watching two guys. It's kind of like it's tied to what we talked about earlier. They're making the timing and the situational football, the spatial awareness, situational awareness are all coming up big in these high leverage moments.
Emory, talk to me about Marcus Freeman being the first black head coach in the national championship. I got to be honest with you, I never would have known that. I would have had no idea until they were talking about it last week with James Franklin and Marcus Freeman. In my head, like, multiple black head coaches have won national. Like, I really didn't realize it. Is it a big deal as a guy wearing an AFCA zip up right now? Is it a big deal? And if it is, why is it a big deal?
It's definitely a big deal, Ross, because nobody wants to talk about race, right? Until they realize this is why you have to talk about it, because it should be like, wow, this is crazy that this hasn't happened yet. And it's a big deal because it shows you, because the knock was blacks can't play quarterback, can't play center, can't play middle linebacker, can't play free safety, can't be a head coach because those are thinking man positions, right? And we know that's a farce, and it has always been a farce. And intellect is a level playing, in terms of like some people have it, some people can earn it. No one starts off innately smarter than someone else. So that has always been a farce on its face. But in terms of football, yes, this is a big deal because now maybe seeing it, sometimes I say this saying a lot, some people don't see it until they saw it already. So maybe it takes for something to happen for people to realize. So, hey, oh, wow, this coach won a national championship or is in a championship game. Let me interview this guy that I've been keeping my eye on for a while that I know personally, but I just never thought of him in that role. But now I can do that. Just like we've seen with quarterbacks and middle linebackers, centers, and free safeties is now doing the same thing with head coaches. You see it more in the NFL. We've always saw it in the NBA. And now we're starting to see more of that in college football. So I'm excited for these guys to get these opportunities and showcase that there's more talent out there than recycling the same 17 head coaches around college football.
So funny that you say that, because I do think like 30 years ago, maybe, at some of those positions, it was predominantly white. It's not, I mean, middle linebacker, like quarterback, like I don't think that's really the case anymore at a lot of positions. Really, really well said and good point. Curious to get your breakdown of the All Star Game circuit you've been on. I know you've been to. I follow you on social media at FBall Game Plan. You've already been to several. What's the importance of being there in person, and who's really jumped out to you?
The importance of being there in person, Ross, is to see body types and to see some guys live that you hadn't seen on film yet, and from schools that you hadn't really gotten a chance to check out yet, and to get a true one-to-one. Because like you talked about earlier with the draft guide, I grade so many, over 1,000 prospects. So sometimes when you're watching 1,000 players, you kind of wonder, okay, is this guy from, you know, Montclair State is as good as is he better than this dude from Michigan State along the defensive line? Well, at an All-Star game, you have a chance to see a guy from Montclair State lined up next to a guy from Michigan State, and you get your answer. You will leave an All-Star game event, these smaller ones especially, with more answers than questions. And it also makes you go back to the film. So I've been to the East-West Bowl up in Canada, FCS Bowl down in Orlando, the Hula Bowl recently here in Orlando. College Gridiron Showcase was in Fort Worth last week, both of those events, and now I'm here in Orlando for the Tropical Bowl. And so we talked about the FCS Bowl, we talked about the East-West Bowl out in Canada. So for the I'll start with the Tropical Bowl because I actually called that game today. And what was so great about this is this event, man, it was, you talk about NFL sons playing college football, bro. Jordan Bly, the wide receiver out of Gardner Webb, Dre Bly's son, was
My gosh.
was the best receiver here. Michael Love is Julian Love's brother out of Long Island. Had a nice catch and run for a touchdown, about a 50-yard touchdown. Musa Muhammad's son, is in this game. Chuck Smith the fourth, defensive end out of Villanova, is Chuck Smith's son. He was at this game. So it was a family affair down here at the Tropical Bowl, and all of those guys really stood out and excelled. So that was cool to see. And it's also cool to see guys travel to different games. College Gridiron Showcase. Taylor Elgersma, the quarterback of Wilfrid Laurier out in Canada. I saw him back in May. It was like, I thought he was the best Canadian quarterback there. He gets to the College Gridiron Showcase, and when I say, Ross, the arm strength of this dude is insane. It was a difference between him and the other quarterbacks. He performed so well, he got the call up to the Tropical Bowl scrimmage, which was an overflow of prospects for the game, and they had a separate team that participated in the scrimmage after this game. And throughout the week of practice, he was throwing the football. I'm talking about the difference in throwing a Canadian ball and then throwing an NFL ball is significant. And he was spinning it like he was, I mean, he came in at 6'4", 215, and spun the football like a first round pick. Like, so that's why I tweeted out, he may go high in the CFL draft because he is that dude. Multiple teams was talking to him after practice for about 30 minutes before the next practice started. He was locked in conversations with a couple of teams from the NFC. And for the Hula Bowl, Carlin Vigors out of UL Monroe, outstanding corner. Everyone was slipping and falling on the field. It felt like he was out there full speed, dry. It didn't matter. So I thought he did really well. And it was cool to see Cornell quarterback Jameson Wong get down at the Hula Bowl, compete really well, make things happen, and make a name for himself.
Nice. I love it. Awesome, awesome breakdown. That's cool. Is the Canadian Bowl different than like a U.S. college bowl?
They play theirs before the season because you ain't doing jack up there right now.
No, I mean the ball itself.
Oh yeah, it feels a little bit fatter around the center. So I can throw a college football and NFL ball about 55 yards, Ross. I tried to throw a Canadian ball up there about 4 years ago, 35.
Seriously?
Seriously, bro.
But isn't the college ball, which one's fatter, the college ball or the NFL ball?
The college ball is and the CFL ball is kind of shorter, just like the college. It feels a little bit shorter than the college ball and a little bit fatter.
We do some really stupid things. Like, why don't we just have all the balls be the same? Like, or why did college NFL not have the same rules? I mean, it's really stupid. It really, you know why? because broadcasters are people too. And I do college games and NFL, and it gets confusing every once in a while about whether you can do a horse collar in the pocket or not. One you can, one you can't. Just check out this man on social media. He's awesome, at FBall Game Plan. That way you know where he always is. And, of course, the draft guide, footballgameplan.com/2025 draft guide. I'm at Ross Tucker NFL. We are at Ross Tucker Pod. The keg is kicked. We're all tapped out.
Thanks for tuning in to College Draft. Make sure to also check out the Ross Tucker Football Podcast, Even Money, and Fantasy Feast, all on the DraftKings Network, YouTube, or subscribe to the podcast on your favorite platform.